I think it was Resolution 597. Can you explain what that is?
Well, we were recognizing chiropractors in the month of October and the service that they provide to our community. Mm-hmm. So we designated the entire month as Chiropractor Health Month.
That's awesome. In that, what prompted that type of state action, do you think?
I do believe the opioid crisis certainly was one of the factors in considering raising awareness of what the chiropractic practice brings to pain management and treatment. We're certainly experiencing an epidemic of opioid use, not only use, but of overdoses.
Sure.
And we see it even locally here in Montgomery County.
Sure.
So we're trying to raise awareness of the issue.
Right. So in the step of awareness, is the goal of 597 to show alternatives to, we'll say opioid medications and that type of stuff? Instead of them being kind of the first line of defense, we're trying to show a different perspective that people may or may not know of?
Exactly.
Okay.
I think that in the past, that was the first line. You go to the doctor, he writes a script, you go to the pharmacy, fill it. You're not really aware of some of the risks that you're taking in doing that. So we're very interested in raising awareness of alternative forms of pain management.
Sure.
And of course, the chiropractic health care provides an alternative to pain management.
Sure. So Karen, just bring you in on this. So what does a chiropractor do?
We basically evaluate our patients, take a full history on them, take them through a full exam, orthopedic, neurological, range of motion, palpatory. We have x-rays, provide a diagnosis, and give our patients a treatment plan to help treat spinal pain.
And is that done with medications? Is that done as a non-medicated type of treatment? How does that all work?
We don't use any medications, and we try to help our patients avoid surgery.
Wonderful. So Marcy, as we come back and you start to think about what an opioid is and what it does, what does an opioid do?
It actually reduces pain.
Okay. I thought this was very interesting. When we were preparing for this show and that type of thing, what were opioids originally used for?
What I've come to learn is they've been used to treat cancer originally.
Yeah,
but of course
their
use was expanded beyond that original purpose.
Sure. And so now we start to see that a medication that has an addictive quality at this point is now being put into a treatment plan that has, I will say, a bigger funnel for people to be given that medication to at this point, which means that our addiction rates would go up. So in that process, what have we seen on a local level on addiction, maybe on overdose, maybe on death?
We've heard some very, very sad stories. I've gone to hearings across the state on this issue where we've heard from parents who's, really young, their children they could have been athletes or had a really promising future, and they experienced an injury, go to the doctor, they're prescribed an opioid for pain, and that leads to a life of addiction. Sometimes a life of addiction, and worst case scenario, sometimes an overdose and death.
Sure.
So they're very sad stories. Locally, I've had many parents and grandparents come in to talk to me. In fact, I did a video of a lot of families locally who've experienced a loss, an overdose loss of one of their children or grandchildren. They're heartbreaking stories. Stories of parents who need to administer naloxone to their own child to bring them back to life.
Sure.
So it's everywhere, and it's across all barriers. It doesn't really matter what kind of family, wealthy, if you're, not so wealthy, it hits all families. In Montgomery County, in fact, 1 in 4 families are experiencing an abuse issue within their family.
Wow. I think what was really interesting is that when we looked at some of the stats, and Karen, you probably can validate this as well, I think in the year 2000 there was something like 1,900 deaths, and then over the last 20 years, I think it has ballooned to over 400,000. So now they're saying that, it's, I think, 139 deaths per day from these types of opioid overdoses and that type of stuff, which is just, you start to put the context of the epidemic and the crisis into context now. These numbers are staggering.
They are staggering. In fact, we're hearing for young people, it's now the number 1 cause of death. It used to be a car accident.
So
young folks get in a car, they don't drive, so, they don't make the best decisions. But I think the opioid crisis and the drug overdose issue has surpassed even car accidents as the number 1 cause of death.
Gotcha. Karen, so again, in your clinical practice and that type of stuff and what you've seen, do you ever see where medications are just given out too easily on a narcotic basis at this point where it maybe shouldn't be?
I believe so. I think I don't want to say a standard, but maybe a standard has been set that if you go to your doctor and you're in pain, that's the way that they're trained to treat the spinal pain.
And so then that leads to other things. Do we have any stats, or do you have any stats on how much, you go from an opioid prescription overdose into maybe illicit drugs such as heroin? Is there a gateway to that? Is there a connection to that, or do we not know that?
There certainly can be. I don't have any numbers with me on that, but that is the story that we hear.
Okay.
I mean, when you're talking about quantitative data, I don't have that.
Sure.
But the stories that we hear as we've traveled across the state with these hearings is that happens over and over again. It starts out with a script and ends up in illicit drug use.
Right.
When they become addicted and the doctor no longer wants to write the script, they find a way to get it someplace else.
Yeah, it's very disheartening and very saddening, that's for sure as well. What would be your take-home message, as you're looking at the viewers and that type of stuff, of what they should be thinking from your vantage point? Because I'm going to ask Karen the same thing, what her vantage point is from a clinical standpoint. But you as being a mom, you being a representative, what would you say the take-home message is out of everything that you've learned so far in your journey?
And I think I always first look at every issue through the lens of being a mom and a grandmom and try to keep my own children and grandchildren safe. So I would always, this awareness issue, just don't assume it's not going to happen in your family. It can happen in any family. Number one, know it's out there. Know that it's accessible to children and students. And when you go to the doctor, ask questions. I mean, if you're prescribed an opioid or a pain reliever that is a narcotic, please ask questions if it's necessary. There are places out there for treatment if you are experiencing some kind of addictive behaviors.
Sure.
Please seek help. You can contact my office, and we can get you in touch with people.
That's wonderful. So, Karen, now as we shift gears from we'll say the social end of it to more the healthcare end of it, you as being a chiropractor, being in practice for almost 20 years right now at this point, what can a patient expect if they would come into this office and have your treatment? I know you went through the history and that type of stuff, but what would their experience be after that?
We provide adjustments or spinal manipulative therapy, as well as manual therapy such as active release technique or Graston or myofascial release. We also do therapeutic exercises to strengthen and correct muscle imbalances. We have other use of modalities in the office like electric stimulation and ultrasound.
So what have some of the outcomes been for you?
Our outcomes have been great. Our follow-up studies on our patients 1 year after the fact are showing a high 90% in outcome assessment as well as patient satisfaction rate.
Is chiropractic safe for disc herniations? Is it safe for arthritis? That's a common question that I think a lot of people want to know, because if that is something that would deter them from seeking alternative care, this is something I think that would be very important. Because when you look at the research on safety, it started in 1986. So what do you see in your own clinical practice?
Chiropractic care is extremely safe. The only adverse effects that we really see are muscle soreness. We have, in that study in 2007, it showed no increase and an improvement in function 6 weeks after or worth of care of chiropractic care.
Yeah, I think this is of note that we want to kind of pay attention to. The study that Dr. Karen was talking about was led by Dr. Chow, who's a medical doctor, led a team of medical doctors, and they looked at discogenic sciatica, confirmed by MRI, that people had a disc herniation at this point, and then they had the radiating pain coming down the leg. If I remember correctly, when we were looking at this study, I think that they had a 1.6 and a 1.7 effect on leg pain and function. And what that means to us is that just means that they had a great effect on the reduction of pain and the improvement of function. Is that correct?
Correct.
So with that being said, we start to see that not only is chiropractic care safe, but it does have an effectiveness, which then I think brought the state into this, because that was a published study that I think that you have become aware of as well. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so now all of a sudden we start to see that disc herniations and arthritis and that type of stuff can respond to some of these types of cares without having the influence of an addictive medication. Sets things apart, I would have to say. All right. So again, Karen, then coming back to your end of this, what would be your take-home message as you start to think about what you'd want the viewer to look at and to consider?
I think that chiropractic care should be your number one or your first choice for neck pain and back pain. It's extremely effective, not in just outcomes, but also cost effective. and we're able to treat our patients without the use of drugs and avoiding surgery.
Absolutely. And I kind of even come back to this because I also have a personal, component with this as well. I mean, when we look at, from an employer standpoint, I think some of the stats that you had provided to us is that, it's $18 billion annually that employers take on from sick days lost, productivity, medical expenses, co-pays, and that type of stuff from a person that has the use of an opioid or a narcotic at that point. And then one of the studies I just found out last night is that I think it was in the first 30 days of one single dose of opioid that there's a 400% chance of suicide. Which is just, these are mind-blowing stats when you start to think about it. And then you start to think about the collateral damage that sits out, not just in the person who passes, but the family. So, and that's some of the stuff that I think that you have said that you've seen, and that you've been so, we'll say, touched and moved by. Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, it's devastating, right, not only to the family, but the community at large. We're losing a whole generation of people.
Sure.
And certain industries we know are affected more heavily, certainly the construction industry. We see that when you talk about workers' comp, and we've tried to make some inroads there in the formulary and add some more oversight to those kinds of things. We've run into some resistance, but clearly there are folks out there that it's not their fault. They're getting sort of entangled into this addictive situation where all they wanted to do was to have some relief of the pain that they're experiencing.
Yeah, and I think that this is also some of the stuff that I've come across too, that is that when you start looking at how we've come to this point, there's really nobody to point the finger at, because what happens is that it seems that it just became, these were the guidelines that, doctors were said to follow at that point. And so you look at that, and then all of a sudden it just kind of has blown up in, I'll say, in our whole experience at this point, that has turned out to an outcome I don't think anybody ever anticipated or ever kind of even foresaw at this point. But we're here now, and so this is where we have to start trying to make a significant difference in impact in people's lives, and we all stand in a great platform to do that.
With the knowledge that we have now, I think there's other options and better options than opioids.
I often kind of think about this, and I'll kind of even close with this, is that could you imagine that if 139 people died every day in an airplane accident, what would happen to everybody at this point, and how all that would be, we'll say, construed, and airlines would be grounded and that type of stuff. And I think that's where we're at right now. We're losing so many people per day that we're finally starting to take note of where we need to go with this whole thing. So I thank you very much for both coming on to the show. I think that it's a great topic that we need to continue to explore and come across and show viable options that we're looking at so people can make informed choices. So, good day and good health.
Look into, if you're caring for a family member, look into getting some help once in a while. If you're looking to go away for a day trip with your husband or your children or your grandchildren, look into having somebody come and stay with mom or dad or your aunt, or maybe it is your husband or your wife, so that you can still do that, because you need to continue to live and still provide the quality of care for that loved one. And you can. It's it's probably the best advice I can give, because of being the caregiver as you have been. Sometimes just to have somebody else fresh and you come back fresh, you're much more tolerant, you're much more relaxed, and it's a lot easier. And sometimes we're so wrapped up in caring for that person, we forget to care for ourselves. If there's another family member that can help you, that's great. But also remember that when you depend on them, they have lives too. Sometimes it's better, way better, to just hire somebody who now independently, you're in control, your family member's in control, and you can spend time with your family and do those things. And liability-wise, it doesn't put you at a risk either, which a lot of people don't think about. I always say Chestnut Knoll at home is 11 years old, and what an amazing group of people. I thank them every time. We have quarterly meetings, and I thank them on a regular basis because the success of Chestnut Knoll at home, a lot of people say, oh, it's you, Linda, because you have the drive, you have the desire, you whatever it is that I have. But I couldn't have done it alone.
No.
And I have some tremendous people that work for me, and without what they do, we wouldn't be where we are. And I always tell them, hold your head high. When they say, oh, you're only a caregiver, no, that's a big thing. When they say you're only a caregiver, that caregiver is the biggest thing because you make a difference in someone's life every day. You may be that person who that person waits all day to see, the only person they see. And so if I can say one more thing about that, if there are any of your viewers that feel they would like to be a caregiver, if they have always had that desire, I have professional people, I have nurses, I've had doctors, I've had biochemists, I've had the stay-at-home mom, I've had many professional people that always wanted to do something to make a difference in someone's life. One day a week, it doesn't matter, even if it's one day a week, we would love to have them come in because I have nurses that work for me, and guess what? In our nurses' lives, when we work in a hospital or a community or a nursing home, we have many people that we have to take care of, and we can't always give. I used to work in a hospital myself, and there were times that I had to walk away from someone where I would have really loved to have spent a little more time with them, but I had to move on to the next person who needed some help. But in this job, you have 1 hour, 2 hours, maybe 3 hours to just give to one person and make that change for them. And maybe it'll be their last day with us, but you've made that change. And there's no words nor pay that can explain that. I can't. It's just an amazing feeling. And the people in my office are amazing, who make sure people get where they're supposed to get to and make sure that the things that are supposed to be done get done, as well as I could go on and on. I just can't thank them enough because they do a great job.
There once was a haunted house. People said they had heard voices, but no one dared to go inside.
There's a place for wood in your backyard. We recommend the Fire Pit. For looks and performance that outlast a wooden deck, make sure your next deck is built with Trex, engineering what's next in outdoor living.
Your Trex expert is A.D. Moyer Lumber. admoyer.com.
Hi, my name is Dr. Fred Sylvester from New Hanover Chiropractic, and welcome to this edition of Health Talk. Today I thought it was going to be a very interesting topic as we're going to go over fire safety and fire prevention. Brought Nicole and Brian on with us today, who are volunteer fire companies for New Hanover, and Brian also is a police officer in Douglas County, and so they have unbelievable experience, 10 years and 20 years and all that type of stuff, and so I'm sure you guys have seen many different things in your experiences over the years, and all the war stories that have to kind of go with it as well. So today we're going to talk about fire prevention and fire safety, and I think that's all kind of ties into with this month and everything, how else kind of January kind of flows. So, Nicole, start with you. What is fire prevention?
Fire prevention is a kind of broad term, like including like fire safety and some of it's more about being prepared, but also what to do in case there is a fire.
Sure.
So a lot of what we teach about is about, we teach a lot of kids.
Sure.
So we teach about what to do in case there is a fire, how to get out of the house, also about kind of like being prepared in the fact that, like, how to get out of the house, but also what to do in case you can't get out of the house.
Sure.
And how...
So what does, like, your outreach do? I mean, so if you were in an outreach program that you had to go to today, what would that look like?
So we discuss the basics, especially like with kids, about like calling 911.
Yeah, sure.
Knowing their name and their address, like what is the emergency, who's going to show up if there is an emergency,
sure.
And teaching about having a meeting place for kids. So that's big on like them knowing, like, if they get out of the house and making sure that they get out, they stay out, and with that meeting place, knowing that if mom goes out the back door and the kids go out the front door, if they're all at that meeting place, they know everybody's out safe.
So there's no passing ships in the night. So
exactly. So that, like, if the mom comes out the back door and has no idea the kids got out the front, that mom doesn't try and go back in to try and save them and maybe her get hurt herself.
Yeah,
so
something so simple as a meeting place you wouldn't even think would be part of that whole thing.
Exactly. So, like, and for kids, because we teach a lot of the elementary schools in the area and the daycares, and that's one of our biggest takeaways is about, like, having that meeting place and making sure that they stay out. Nothing is as important as you are to stay out of that building.
Sure.
But also teaching them not to play with fire, obviously.
Sure.
Matches and candles and stoves and anything that can harm them as well as their family.
Sure. Brian, what's kind of the prevalence of house fires? And, do you have any stats on that type of stuff? And who's most vulnerable to die in a house fire and those types of things?
The hardest part to answer that is that it's an unknown pretty much all the time, because fire doesn't discriminate. It doesn't choose who it wants to. It doesn't choose when it wants to. It's its own entity of itself. I mean, obviously, when you're dealing with maybe elderly or even like a nursing home side of things and stuff like that, where mobility or access to and from exits and everything like that can play into effect. But again, if you look at the stats throughout the year, there's nothing that varies that it's going to be dominantly males or dominantly females or pets or anything like that. It's really sad in some aspects because, like I said, it doesn't choose and it doesn't pick or it doesn't have its own meaning behind it in some aspects. So
when we look at, when we were preparing for the show, I found a couple things that I found enlightening to myself. Is that, I found that 1 in 3,000 homes burn per year throughout the United States. This is kind of an interesting stat, but I'm not sure if that's actually accurate but it sounds like that's a lot.
Sure. I also believe that it's your territory as well. So predominantly, like an urban-based style, you're going to have more than 1 in 3,000 homes.
Sure.
When you're dealing with major metropolitan cities of New York and Baltimore and Philadelphia and stuff like that, I mean, there's
so the prevalence varies.
10, 12 house fires potentially a day.
I gotcha.
Okay, where out here in a rural situation, we might average, out of 365 days a year, we might average in our New Hanover, we might have 3.
Okay.
So
yes, I see what you're saying. So it's hard to give that number.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's and it's hard to find out like where they took that number from.
Sure.
Where'd you do your studies from based on departments?
Sure.
I mean, we ran 274 calls out of 365 days in 2019.
Wow.
And out of that, we did...
That's busy.
Yeah, I mean, and being a volunteer, I mean, we're leaving our families and getting up in the middle of the night and dinners and holidays and all sorts of stuff. And, I mean, it's hard to say if they were false alarms or, I mean, I'd say probably... luckily, our fire prevention, as strong as it is, we can honestly say that our fire rate in New Hanover is relatively low.
So, Nicole, so what could a family do to have a fire prevention, I'll say, exercise or platform in front of them? You know what I'm saying? So what could a family do today that would help you do that?
So one of the things that, like, our company specifically does is we actually, if they reach out to us in New Hanover Township, we will go to their home with them and discuss an exit drill.
Wow.
And look out the layout of their house and look at all the family members and, like, are they on the second floor? Are they on the first floor? Where do they sleep? The layout, do they each have 2 exits to get out of the home? And, like, we will do that. Not every fire company can do that, but,
Sure.
like, but it's nice that we're able to offer that to the people in our community so that they can learn.
How long has that program been active for?
Probably 2 or 3 years at least.
That's excellent.
Which is, like, more when I got into the fire prevention side of things. But it is a big deal, like, teaching them about their meeting place, making sure if, say, there is a bedroom on the first floor and a bedroom on the second floor, those 2 bedrooms will probably take different exits out of the house.
Okay.
And then discussing where their meeting place is with them. And because we like to teach that if they are in, like, a neighborhood or something like that, it's best to meet at a neighbor's house.
Gotcha.
Because something that a neighbor's house has that your mailbox doesn't have is a phone.
Sure.
So when you get outside, especially the young kids, they know that they need to call 911, but if they talk about their meeting place being the mailbox or somewhere within the vicinity of the house, they may not be able to call for help from there.
Sure.
So it's delaying response times for us to be able to help them.
Wow. Brian, what do you think the number one killer of people who are in house fires? What is it? Is it the fire? Is it the smoke? Is it the heat? Do we know?
Believe it or not, it's majority of the time it's going to be your smoke. Your smoke's going to be a superheated gas that is primarily going to put you unconscious prior to the fire because, again, our natural selection of life is it's hot. Even as a kid, we teach them it's hot, don't touch it. So, again, when it's hot, we don't want to get near it. But the problem is that the smoke it suffocates you, it chokes you out, and basically ends up dropping you down till the point that you're unconscious. And then from there, I mean, you're laying on the floor. If we're not there, I mean, majority of the time within 2 to 3 minutes, I mean, you might succumb to that.
So the question is like, so when everybody tells you to kind of crawl underneath the smoke light, is that the reason for it, because of the heat and the smoke that you're...
So smoke will always find the path of least resistance. So that's the natural thing with it, and it's going to rise. Obviously, predominantly, if it's going to be smoky up top, you're going to have more likely of a chance of crawling on your belly all the way out, of having better air down as low as you can possibly get. So if you do find yourself trapped in that situation, and you can escape or crawl out safely, obviously being down, because it's no different than us. Once you're down lower and you drop below that 3-foot radius, you're going to actually see a little bit better. You're going to feel things a little bit better. You're going to have more oxygen down there because the heavier, thick smoke is going to rise up above. Now, there's different stages of fire. Once it reaches that, it's not really going to matter. It's like a pre-rollover to a flashover situation, pre-flash versus pre-rollover and all that. That's where the actual superheated gases are igniting above your head. Oh. So
is that flashover then?
Flashover is a simultaneous ignition of all the gases and contents inside the room.
So everything's consumed then? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. There's actually really good videos online. If you would ever want to see it, you can go on YouTube, and you could actually just search in there of a flashover simulation, and they actually put like a generic household room together, and they light a small fire, they set a timer, and you'll actually see the contents of everything just get to the point where it flashes over and it ignites everything.
It's really interesting because I think when I was preparing for this, they were going through the 4 or 5 stages and that type of stuff, and I think they were saying flashover can occur between 4 to 6 minutes. I think is that correct?
Depending on the amount of oxygen in the room, depending on the fuel of the fire as well.
That's not a lot of time.
No, I mean, our average response time for the first truck
I was just going to ask you, what is that?
Getting on the street is within 3 to 4 minutes. Okay. We're out the door. So you factor in, a living room content fire of a sofa, 4 to 5 minutes, that room's going to be well off and spreading into something else. But again, I can speak for our department because our chief takes the time and does those stats and lets us know that within 3 to 4 minutes, our first truck is on the road, and primarily we're on location within, give or take, 5 to 7 minutes.
So what would you think that, and again, this is kind of like off the tangent, but when you look at your individual, both of you can answer this. I mean, if flashover, or say you have 2 minutes to get out of your house, and these are just some things I kind of was looking at before you would have to, be worried about death and that type of stuff. 5 minutes kind of flashover. What is the territory that you're covering? And I mean, so if the call is coming in and you have this at the other end of your territory, you're probably not there till 15 or 20 minutes there. Would that be accurate or no?
15 to 20 minutes would probably be a stretch. Okay. Ideally, the best way to explain it is when one of us goes, we all basically go. So
sure.
Kind of putting that into perspective of like, if it's in the northern part of our township, it's not just our company, it's going to be the 3-4 local companies around us. So there is a chance that even though you live in New Hanover Township, but you might border, say, the Upper Frederick side, Upper Frederick actually might be there because their response to your location from our station might actually only be 3 minutes out the door. So,
that makes sense.
Again, a good blanket that I would say would be within less than 10 minutes, someone's going to be on location at your, and again, it also depends on the weather. It depends on the time of the day. It depends on the travel.
Traffic.
It depends on so many of those other factors, but that's why we do what we do when we pre-plan and we set up our run cards and what departments are coming from what direction. So basically, you got to almost look at it as we almost surround it in like 360-degree direction of personnel responding and all.
That's perfect. That's great. I didn't even know that. Nicole, what are some of the causes of house fires?
So again, it's kind of broad. It's everything from culinary mishaps to electrical fires. We had a call a couple years ago where a fire was started from somebody having a space heater plugged into a outlet strip, like a surge protector, which isn't common knowledge that it can easily overheat.
Sure.
And that in the wintertime, that is a big cause of fires.
Okay.
But along with that, it is candles being left on when people aren't home, dryer fires. If people don't clean out like the lint in the line that goes outside, that can build up to a point where
it heats and fire. Yeah.
It's exactly, because as you were talking about earlier, as well as Brian, fire needs 3 things. It needs oxygen.
Okay.
It needs fuel, like the material, like the lint, and it needs heat. So there doesn't have to be a flame for something to catch fire, because as long as there's oxygen,
that's a big misconception.
Exactly, as long as there's oxygen in the air and something to burn, something can heat up so much that it will just ignite, and that's what happens with dryer fires. So, but there's also there's a lot of garage fires when cars, for whatever reason, if something wasn't handled well, chemicals mixed, there is a very wide range of why fires start in homes.
Sure. Yeah.
Barbecues, jumping in, like charcoals, barbecue, propane,
grease.
Stuff like that. Grease fires are very common. She started to touch on things that people don't necessarily keep in mind, that a lot of the chemicals under your kitchen sink, if they're mixed wrong together, they can create a heat source.
Wow.
Again, something as simple as wiping or using a a towel to clean something and then putting it in on a towel that's got engine oil or grease or something like that, if that reacts the wrong way, that can...
The chemistry of it.
Yep, it'll actually ignite. So again, I mean, just from having two flammable liquids mixing together, causing, the chemical chain reaction of, your heat and, again, there's no ignition source, but between the two of them, it creates one.
So what are some fire safety tools, that we could use? I mean, what's your opinion on how smoke alarms should be put in, fire extinguishers? How does that all tie into fire prevention as well?
So that's kind of like one of the things that we do talk about also when we go to homes to assess them. We always talk about having a fire extinguisher near the kitchen.
And is there a way that you can explain how to use a fire extinguisher just as we sit here right now?
Absolutely. So the way that we teach it, and this is actually to me, I feel is a lot of common knowledge.
Sure.
So we use the acronym PASS,
okay.
P-A-S-S, which is P for pull. You want to pull the pin.
Sure.
A is for aim. You want to aim at the base of the fire.
Okay.
If you're aiming at the flame itself, you're not going to do anything. You have to aim it at what is actually on fire.
Okay, makes sense.
The first S is for squeeze. You want to squeeze the handle. That's how the
extinguisher comes out.
Exactly. And then the last S is for sweep. You want to sweep back and forth from edge to edge, whatever is on fire, you want to go back and forth, make sure that you're fully coating it, because if not, it's just going to reignite.
How many houses do you think have fire extinguishers?
Not many.
Okay. And that's something I think that's why I wanted to bring that point.
Yep. But along with fire extinguishers near the kitchen, we talk about smoke detectors. There should be one in every bedroom and every living space in the house. Not necessarily one in the kitchen because they can be sensitive, but
sure.
Maybe around a wall from the kitchen.
Sure.
Which should be, they have ones now that the batteries are supposed to last 10 years.
Okay.
But we suggest...
normally about every 6 months you do your maintenance test.
Spring is change of season.
Yes. Rule of thumb is if you change your clocks, check your battery.
Gotcha.
There's normally a test button on top of them. And even with the 10-year ones where, they're the lithium batteries that are supposed to last, it's still good to check them. It's still good to make sure that they work. And I'm not sure if Nikki was going to touch on it, but if you can afford it, we recommend that you do the dual one, and the dual one is smoke and carbon monoxide, because just so long as our fire prevention goes for fire safety, that's another major killer that happens a lot, because majority of the time people don't have the detectors in their house, and if they do, they're sat somewhere or they're plugged in and they're forgot about. So again, if you're utilizing your smoke detector and changing the battery out, most of the time they're dual, or you can get a dual one that'll do both. So
yeah. So to touch on that real quick, the CO detectors, most importantly in the basements of homes, usually where you have your heating.
Furnaces.
Exactly. So that's usually what the source is, where it comes from. So having one in your lower level especially, and like he said, the dual. So if you have them all over your house, it's better than not, but CO is odorless, it's colorless, it is a silent killer.
Sure.
You have no idea that...
It's even there.
Yeah, exactly, until you just feel tired and you decide to lay down for a nap.
Gotcha.
And it can be deadly.
There are two more questions. So one I'll give to you, and then one I'll give to you. If you do get trapped in a fire, you can't come out at this point. What do you do? So you're in an upstairs bedroom, second, third floor, whatever it is. What do you do?
Okay, so again, talking to the kids, we try to make it as simple as possible. We tell them if they see smoke, if they smell smoke, if there's smoke detectors going off, you don't just want to grab for that door handle first of all, because if it's hot, if the fire's right outside that door, you're going to burn yourself. We teach about feeling with the back of your hand on the door. If it's warm, don't even touch the door handle.
Okay.
And then if that is the case and you realize that you are trapped in that room, you want to cover the door as best as you can, put blankets there, try and keep the smoke from coming in. And a real quick side thought to that is we actually teach about keeping your doors closed when you sleep, because it is a huge way of helping prevent the fire from spreading so quickly through the house.
Oh, okay.
So if you look up online, there are so many pictures about, like, they say close before you doze, and it'll show you pictures of like a room that's completely covered in smoke, and then it'll show you another door that's open where that door was closed when the fire started, and that room is like virtually untouched, which is amazing.
Yeah, it is.
But so if the door's closed, kind of try and block off as much as you can to try and not let the smoke get in.
Sure.
And then the next thing you want to do is hoping that you had some way of alerting the fire department, calling 911. Then you want to open a window and hang by that window to get any clean air, but also because you're going to be in that window to help alert somebody when the first person gets on scene of a suspected house fire. They're going to walk around the house and do a 360 to assess not only where the smoke is coming from, where the fire is, but that gives us the sense of are there bedrooms? Where are the bedrooms? Okay, I see stuff laying on the ground out here. Somebody's trying to get my attention. It makes you look up. If you see a teddy bear or whatever laying on the ground outside of that window, it's automatic, or even like a screen. People will punch out the screen, and like it makes you think, okay, this is not natural. This doesn't belong here. It makes you look up. So that gives us an inkling as to, okay, somebody might be trapped. And especially if they're not hanging out the window and that's the case, then you know that somebody might be in imminent danger also. So, but yeah, keep the window open. Try and get as much fresh air as you can until help can arrive.
Right. What's your take-home message, Brian? Because you've been in this for 20
years.
years.
I'm going to add one more part to hers. Keep in mind that, and I'll touch base almost on my job side of things, just because I'm a police officer for my job doesn't mean I stop being a natural thinker of a firefighter.
For sure.
So, again, the police department responds to 99% of every call that we go on, no matter what. So, again, getting to the window and getting the attention of anything outside, predominantly, majority of the time, your police department will probably be, a police officer is probably going to be the first one there. They normally do the same thing. I know when I get on a location where I work, I do the same thing. I walk around, I try and get as much information as I can. I'll do a full 360 and then report it back to the dispatch. I know majority of the time our police officers in New Hanover will do the same thing. So that being said, it doesn't have to be that you have to yell at a firefighter. Yell to anybody, a neighbor and such like that. So definitely communicate to the outside that you can't get out. My take-home message, you can never be prepared enough. And that goes for any situation, whether you go out to dinner, whether you're at your house, you're at a concert, anything like that. Know a way out, know your exits. And just always be aware of your surroundings.
Nick can give the same question final. What's your take-home message?
It's same thing. It is about being prepared, having an exit drill planned, not only for home, but your workplace as well.
For sure.
I know a lot of schools and offices, they practice fire drills and everything else, so you know that wherever your closest exit is the way you're going to go, but just having
being aware.
Yes, absolutely being aware of your surroundings, because it's so easy to overlook something that can cause a fire or anything else, and just home maintenance and trying to prevent the fire from ever happening is going to be your safest bet as to not get injured or hurt. And the smoke detectors are huge. We used to teach about checking them monthly, but we suggest checking them weekly, because the second that smoke detector goes off, that's your cue to get out of the house, because if that's not working, then you're taking time away from your exit to get out of the home.
Thank you both for coming on, Brian and Nikki. I mean, just some tremendous information, and when you start thinking about how simple things can be to help save lives and prevent, devastating, tragic, horrific results, that type of stuff. I mean, this information is just exceptional, and our community will only benefit from having this. And then I would also encourage our community that If you want to have any of the exit plans in the fire prevention, please contact the department, because I don't think that's a service many people know about. At least I didn't, and until you came here today, that is something that I think is so noteworthy and worthwhile, because talk about just taking an active, proactive step in things. It's amazing that you guys offer it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much for coming on to the show.
Absolutely.
Good day and good health.
Hey, who are you?
Oh, hey, Jeff, I'm a car thief.
What?
I'm here to steal your car because, well, that's my job.
What?
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 It happens. So get Allstate. I'd be better protected from mayhem, like me.
Your local Allstate insurance representative is Mike Angro on Lewis Road in Royersford. Check us out on the web or call us at 484-975-0120.
Hey, listen up. It's time to love your heart. Go to clevelandclinic.org/loveyourheart and learn what really matters to that lovable heart of yours.
Limerick Bowl is the area's ultimate family entertainment center. Your league bowling headquarters for all ages and all abilities. Come in anytime and enjoy daily specials or experience our weekend glow bowling. Celebrate your next birthday at Limerick Bowl with the area's most affordable party packages. Now including our newly renovated Family Fun Arcade. Limerick Bowl on West Ridge Pike. Get more information about upcoming leagues, tournaments, and open bowling specials online at limerickbowl.com.
Look into, if you're caring for a family member, look into getting some help once in a while. If you're looking to go away for a day trip with your husband or your children or your grandchildren, look into having somebody come and stay with mom or dad or your aunt, or maybe it is your husband or your wife, so that you can still do that, because you need to continue to live and still provide the quality of care for that loved one. And you can. It's a very, it's probably the best advice I can give, because of being the caregiver as you have been. Sometimes just to have somebody else fresh and you come back fresh, you're much more tolerant, you're much more relaxed, and it's a lot easier. And sometimes we're so wrapped up in caring for that person, we forget to care for ourselves. If there's another family member that can help you, that's great. But also remember that when you depend on them, they have lives too. Sometimes it's better, way better, to just hire somebody who now independently, you're in control, your family member's in control, and you can spend time with your family and do those things. And liability-wise, it doesn't put you at a risk either, which a lot of people don't think about. I always say Chestnut Knoll at home is 11 years old, and what an amazing group of people. I thank them every time we have quarterly meetings, and I thank them on a regular basis, because the success of Chestnut Knoll at home, a lot of people say, oh, it's you, Linda, because you have the drive, you have the desire, you whatever it is that I have. But I couldn't have done it alone. No. And I have some tremendous people that work for me, and without what they do, we wouldn't be where we are. And I always tell them, hold your head high. When they say, oh, you're only a caregiver, no, that's a big thing. When they say you're only a caregiver, that caregiver is the biggest thing, because you make a difference in someone's life every day. You may be that person who, that person waits all day to see, the only person they see. And so if I can say one more thing about that, if there are any of your viewers that feel they would like to be a caregiver, if they have always had that desire. I have professional people, I have nurses, I've had doctors, I've had biochemists, I've had the stay-at-home mom, I've had many professional people that always wanted to do something to make a difference in someone's life. One day a week, it doesn't matter, even if it's one day a week, we would love to have them come in, because I have nurses that work for me, and guess what? In our nurses' lives, when we work in a hospital or a community or a nursing home, we have many people that we have to take care of. And we can't always give. I used to work in a hospital myself, and there were times that I had to walk away from someone where I would have really loved to have spent a little more time with them.
Firm. We're at 347